So thank you all very much for coming. And I'd like to start with some philosophical biases up front, because today we're talking about the art of extraordinary attention. The biases that I have are twofold. Number one, other people matter and they're worthy of our care and attention. Number two, those who listen better have greater harmony in their relationships, satisfaction, and greater overall health. Now, there's years and years of data to back me up on that second philosophical point, but I'd like to highlight the first point. People matter. There's this interesting set of studies that have come out that shows that people, in part, quit their immediate supervisor. That when they're thinking of looking for a new job, a huge variable in whether or not they're looking for new work is who their current supervisor is and how they are treated. A great way to alienate people in your life is to communicate to them, verbally or non-verbally, that they don't matter. There was a series of studies that I was reading a year ago preparing this presentation where I found that it's about 80% of the decision making about whether or not to leave a job comes down to whether or not I feel like I matter to my supervisor, my colleagues, if I matter at all at work. And communication is a huge part of that. It was quite painful for the other day, for example. I was hanging out with a friend of mine who owns a small business, and he was wondering why his turnover rate was so high. And he just really struggling with this. But in hanging out with him at his shop, he is artful, gifted at miscommunicating to people their worth. He tends to multitask constantly. He tends to focus on criticism. He tends to focus on solutions rather than listening, and it's constantly undermining the people that he employs, the people that work for him. And so he keeps burning through employees the entire time. It's like, I love my people. I don't know why they leave. And because you don't communicate that to them. How often do you really focus and really listen to what their cares and concerns are? When an issue comes up at work, are you the first one asking questions and attending deeply to what's going on? Or are you the one rushing in with criticism and solutions? Right? Here's something I'd like to apply. Because, for me, the personal is the professional, the professional is the personal. Carl Rogers, for example, those of you who have taken a psychology class have heard the name Carl Rogers. He's the founder of person-centered or client-centered psychotherapy. One of the things that he observed is that when people are involved in life with other people who care, life becomes therapy and therapy becomes life. That when we're around people who are therapeutic to us, people who care for us and support us, that helps us with all sorts of stresses, depressions, anxieties, etc., when we're just surrounded by people who genuinely care. And one of the things that I worry about is how often we miscommunicate our level of care. And so, coming into this with this bias, people matter, and they matter a lot. And how we communicate to them informs whether or not they feel they matter to us. This happens both personally and it happens professionally. This is where they overlap. So, a couple of other reasons why we can focus on our listening skills. People who listen tend to be better informed. They tend to know what's going on. They tend to be very aware of situations. They tend to know who's involved and what's happening. Number two, they tend to be better leaders. Now, I'm not saying they're more likely to be promoted into leadership positions. I'm saying when they are promoted, their turnover rates are lower and their teams get more done. Okay? And then the third one is people who listen better in certain roles tend to be better at making money. Before I became a psychologist, I worked in sales. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember AT&T's ad where they would drop a pin in front of a phone receiver and you can hear a pin drop. Okay, you remember that. I was a salesman for that, okay? And a lot of the skills that I learned as a successful salesman helped me become a better therapist later. Isn't that weird? Because a lot of successful sales is listening deeply. A lot of successful therapy, listening deeply. Now, again, the personal is the professional is personal. When I'm on a date with my sweetheart, do you know how she knows that she is loved and that she matters to me? That's right, listening deeply. So it turns out what I learned in sales as a college kid has helped not only my professional life as a psychologist, but my date nights on Friday. Okay, so more reasons to listen deeply and listen well. So after a conversation, our working goal can be that the other walks away from a conversation feeling like we really got them and understood them, particularly who they are and where they're coming from. And so Chris Orlob is a business psychologist. He was curious back to sales. What predicts a successful sale? Most successful calls fall around a 40 to 60 split. That the person doing the selling spends 60% of the time listening and 40% of the time selling. And some of you are saying, we're at a developmental center. We're not selling anything. Oh, I hate to break it to you. Some of you get it. You're selling some things. One of the hardest things you're selling people on is themselves. How many of the individuals you work with believe in themselves? Far less than you do. Probably a lot of them. Especially, a lot of folks coming through these doors, from what I understand from history, have suffered a lot of trauma. They've been put down, torn apart a lot in life. And so your faith in them is what you're selling them on. You're trying to help them believe in themselves first and foremost. And that is one of the hardest sales you'll ever do. And so one of the ways to do it is make sure you listen deeply and you understand clearly. One of the things that I find myself doing as a psychologist a lot is trying to sell people not only on their own self-worth, but on the possibility of their own well-being. One of the things that we confront a lot in our shared line of work is hopelessness. Many of the individuals we work with have good reason to feel hopeless. And what we do is we try to sell them on hope. And that's another very, very difficult sale. How you do it is by listening deeply. So, Judith Glaser did a whole bunch of work on conversational intelligence and how that works for supervisors, particularly how to infuse a supervisory relationship with trust. And some of you may be thinking, but I don't supervise anybody. Okay, if you're working with individuals in your care, then you are supervising them not as an employee, but as a caregiver. If you have children at home, you're not supervising them as an employer, I hope, unless they're getting paid to do chores. You are providing supervision for them in terms of their own health and welfare and guidance, right? Most of us, if we're an adult, are supervising other people at some point, even if we do not have the technical term supervisor on the plaque on our desk, right? You are always supervising other people, or generally you are. So, first skill that she finds when it comes to developing trust is conversational intelligence, particularly asking open-ended questions. What she did is, rather than studying the supervisors, she inversed this and found supervisees who felt cared for, supportive, and that they were growing in their particular role. Then later she applied it to clinical work. Are clients feeling cared for and supported by their therapist? And she found that it was remarkably similar. No, your supervisor here at work is not necessarily your therapist. Please don't put them in that role. But it's amazing how the skills are transferable. So, number one, ask open-ended questions. One of the things that we usually do, especially when we're stressed and hurried, and let's face it, many of us are often stressed and hurried, we tend to ask closed questions. Yes or no, right? Instead, one of the things she found is that people with better conversational intelligence tend to ask more open-ended questions. Who, what, where, when, and why, right, are great questions. Rather than, you did this, you did that, instead you start a meeting with, please help me understand what happened, okay? Like the other day, for example, we had a big research presentation due, and it was a consultation gig, it was a lot of money, and I had 2 research assistants who were helping me crunch the data and prepare the presentation. It was the midnight hour the night before. I'm opening our shared Google Drive, and the presentation isn't there. Okay, to be fair, the presentation was there, but it was the parts that I had done. The parts that they needed to fill in were still blank. Now, that's the night before, and I don't know if you all know this, I'm the kind of guy that works ahead. Procrastination works to build our anxiety, and that anxiety can help us motivate us to complete things. I'm old. I don't need that anxiety in my life, so I tend to work ahead. I went back through the emails. I'd given them a clear deadline for 3 nights earlier, and it still wasn't done. And I found myself getting heated. So I reached out to them, and I said, this was due at this time. It's not there. Ooh, how well do you think that went over? Exactly. Didn't go over well at all. Now I've got 2 research assistants who are freaking out at midnight the night before a presentation. I failed my own listening skills. So about 2 a.m., everything got uploaded. I double-checked in the morning. Everything was there. Spent some time polishing it before the presentation. And then I had 2 stressed out research assistants were stumbling over their words during this consultation. I remembered my conversational skills. I said, okay, I'm taking you all out to lunch. I'm very sorry I was very sharp with you. And so we went to lunch and I said, okay, please help me understand what happened. Like walk me through why we were working late last night when the deadline was 3 days before. Please help me understand. And it was a confluence of errors. This, and this happened with one of them. They tried to volley to the other one, but that one couldn't respond because they had this and this and this emergency going on, and they thought this one had that role, and the other one thought the one had the same role, and it was just a series of misunderstandings. And so rather than me getting upset and then demanding, I ask a question. Okay, I'm wondering what some things we could do differently for the next one to make sure that this is covered, right? So we set up some communication, we set up some things like that, and the next presentation went much better. But I'll never forget how stressed out my two supervisees were, that they had failed old Dr. Draper, and oh no, they're in so much trouble, and we're gonna get fired, and I didn't say any of that. One of the things that people do, and this is an important thing, is we tend to fill ambiguity up with anxiety, okay? So when a situation is ambiguous, for example, I just sent them a very sharp message, what happened, and they're going to fill in all of the blanks around that with their own insecurities. That's very common, a lot of people do it. And so therefore, when you're the one asking them for information rather than demanding or telling, then they get to fill the ambiguity in with their point of view, which decreases their anxiety and increases the quality of their work. Likewise, with clients. One of the things that I work hard with my clinical supervisees, do not have critical conversations by text message. Do not have critical conversations by email. That if a client texts you and then they send you a paragraph and they're really upset about some things, say, great, I can't wait to talk to you about this face-to-face on Thursday, or if it's a crisis, actually call them. You guys get where I'm coming from? Because we fill in ambiguity with anxiety. And so when we get a text message, what's missing is nonverbals, tone, etc. And as you know, nonverbal communication suffuses all of communication. There used to be this adage that 80-90% of communication is nonverbal. A better way to look at that is nonverbal sides of communication inform 80 to 90% of total communication. And so therefore with text message, we don't have that nonverbal. And so therefore people will fill in with their own anxiety, and it can create all sorts of blow-ups. Like working with my kids. I'm so grateful because as they're out and dating, they try to set that boundary with the people they're dating. Hey, you blew up my phone at 3 a.m. with all of your insecurities about all the drama in our relationship. Let's talk about this face-to-face. And one of the things that I'm finding, because all of them are in their early to mid-20s, is the people that they're dating, that's foreign to them. They want to try to have crucial conversations by text. And so I appreciate that if you're following my counsel, that may put you at odds with some of your peers who want to have crucial conversations by text. But believe me, it goes much better when you talk about it face-to-face. And by the way, for certain crucial conversations, just between you and I, there needs to be food involved. Like my supervisees know, if old Dr. D invites you out for pie, there's going to be a crucial conversation, okay? Because when people are eating and sharing, when we eat, that activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest nervous system, and it calms us down. And so therefore, a little ways into it, then we can start to say, okay, please help me understand what happened here. Okay, why did it happen that way? And it's much easier when people are calmer. It's one where I haven't done this and I don't know a good way to do it, but having like a snack bar for my clients in psychotherapy when I'm doing trauma work, so they can snack and that'll help calm them down, and then we can get into some of the deeper historical trauma. Haven't figured out a way to do that. My current 50% effort is I go and I get those big Costco-sized bags of like Hershey chocolate, and I sit that right by the client's comfy chair, and so they can sit and snack a little bit, presuming they're not diabetic, and then that helps calm them down enough that we can get into some deeper work. So listening with an open ear, asking open-ended questions. Listening with an open mind is crucial. Like one researcher, Ausberger, said, being heard is so close to feeling loved that for the average person, they're indistinguishable. And some of you say, well, I don't want my clients or my colleagues to feel like I love them romantically. No, he's not talking romantic love. He is talking genuine, compassionate care. that being heard is so close to feeling cared for that for the average person, they're indistinguishable, okay? And so one of the things that we hit really hard in clinical training is modeling and showing care by listening deeply. If you have to tell somebody, no, wait, I care about you, nope, there's tons and tons of things you could have done first so you never have to use those words. For example, think of the people in your life who never say, I love you, but you know care deeply for you. It's one of two things they're likely doing. One, it's tireless service and faith on your behalf, or two, they listen to you deeply, or both. Get where I'm coming from? They never have to say, but I really care about you, because they model it, they demonstrate it, they don't have to use those words. So another quote, even if you don't say anything, if you listen carefully, people will consider you a great conversationalist. So there was a really cool set of studies that were done on people who suffer social anxiety, and they would put them in party situations, which people who are socially phobic, who suffer a lot of social anxiety, that's hell, right? And they would put them there, and they tried to figure out what happens at a party that helps people with social anxiety calm down. And what they found is if they set up these mock parties and they took an individual who's very authentic, comfortable in their skin, and listens deeply, that not only lowered the stress for the person with social anxiety, it lowered the stress for everybody in these mock party scenarios. That it really only takes a couple of people comfortable in their skin, willing to listen deeply, who listen far more than they speak, to lower everybody's stress. And so therefore at work parties, that's one of the things I encourage my employees to do, and I try to do it myself. Be the person in the room, comfortable in the skin, listening to other people deeply. It will lessen everybody's anxiety. Okay, like what Kelly said, even if you don't say anything, listen carefully and people will consider you a great conversationalist. Okay? Now, back to Carl Rogers. When somebody really hears you without passing judgment, without trying to take responsibility for you, without trying to mold you, it feels damn good. Direct quote from Carl Rogers. When somebody really hears you without passing judgment, without trying to take responsibility, without trying to mold, it feels great. Okay? So, backing up Judith Glazer's work. Now, a couple more points in her research. One is practicing empathy. She highlights in some of her work that our culture is very individualistic and solution-focused. And so one of the things that we hear is, well, I'm just not a good listener. And people attribute that as some kind of core characteristic of themselves. Judith would push back and say, this is a skill that is learned, and you learn it by practicing it. One of the things that if you pay attention to your own development is you can develop habits that become personality. Okay? For example, I come across to many people as pretty chill. If you'd met me 30 years ago, you would not have used that term. I was very hot-tempered, very driven, very focused, very intense. And I'm burning people with my presence. My intensity makes people afraid. How can I settle in, open myself up, and really connect to other people? Listening was not second nature. But through practice, it can be. A lot of our world wants solutions right now. And so it pushes us not to take a moment to listen. That's our dog-eat-dog world. And Judith showed, through years of experimenting, that it can actually be unlearned, that we can actually take a few extra seconds. And it doesn't actually take a ton of time for us to really tune in to somebody else. So one of the things that she also highlights is the role of empathy in terms of really looking at the issue from the perspective of the other person. Years ago, I was studying ancient Judaism, Old Testament kind of stuff. And it was interesting in studying these ancient cultures that in ancient Judaism, they have this word for sin and this word for repent. Like in Greek, for example, to sin is to miss the mark and to repent is to hit the mark. But in ancient Judaism, to sin is to turn away from and to repent is to turn towards. Now, what does this old philosophy have to do with modern conversation? Because it meant something very different back then. If you're turned away from somebody, you're not looking at something from their point of view. You're not looking at an issue from their point of view. To try to turn towards them is to co-understand a phenomenon with them, to really get where they are coming from. Oftentimes, it's hard for us to loosen our grip on our own point of view, especially when we're stressed, especially when there's a problem, to try to look at it from the other person's perspective. But that's when it's vitally crucial for us to do so. For example, when years ago we were going through a very large trauma as a family, and some of my kids started turning on each other, just responding to the stress in the home. And I sat down with them, and the last thing I needed with everything else going on was more of my kids upset and at each other's throats. And so I had that natural inclination in our dog-eat-dog world. You kids stop that right now. You got to fix this. Ugh. That's turning away from them. I'm not understanding what's going on. And so by sitting down and listening to them together, they could inform me what their viewpoints were. I was turning towards them. One of the things this old philosophy teaches us is by turning towards people, then you can find a path together because you're now seeing the same thing. But you have to really join with them first, really look at things from their point of view to decide what a path forward is. Some of you have experienced this with your own children or with the individuals you work with here. That finally, when you got where they were coming from and they understood that you got them, then they were willing to take steps ahead. Okay? So that's the power of empathic listening. So the other thing that she talks about is the art of the volley. How to keep it going naturally. So a lot of these things, a lot of the volley, like picture people working out like a volleyball team. You know, how long can they keep the ball in the air? So they'll pop the ball up to one another and see how long they can keep the ball going before the ball touches the ground. Same thing can happen in soccer. I'm old enough to remember hacky sacks, these little bean bags that you would try to keep off the ground with your friends. That actually comes from soccer players who would try to do the same thing with a soccer ball. You can do that conversationally. And there are little conversational tools you can use like, oh, could you help me get what you mean? Would you tell me more about that? Oh, what did you do next? Then what happened, right? There are various words that you can use to keep the conversation lively and going. Now, this is where I get to kindly disagree with Judith Glaser. There is one way to keep a conversation going. This is the tool at the bottom of your toolbox. You don't need to use it very often, but it's actually paradoxically silence. Okay? Some of you as parents get this. You're sitting down with the kid, you got yet another call from the principal, and you're sitting down and you're staring at them over the dining room table. What? Can you tell me what happened? And they start making excuses and how unfair, and they're picked on and everything else, and you just sit and quietly, keep your mouth shut. And eventually, sometimes they'll start sharing more than what they would have shared if you were guiding the conversation. And so for those of you that have clinical training, like your social workers, clinical mental health counselors, et cetera, silence is one of the things that's rarely taught in clinical listening classes anymore. Like I know two of you, were you guys taught silence in your clinical listening classes? Adam, you were? You were too? Excellent. That didn't used to be part of the curriculum. It's hard to do. Yep. Because talk about this more in a minute. There is an interesting tendency when like there's whole listening skills classes that we can teach. It looks a lot like your listening skills classes from your graduate program. But the two groups that are hardest to teach listening skills to are doctors and therapists. Why do you suppose that is? Why are doctors and therapists really hard to get them to sit down, shut up, and listen? Any guesses? Time constraints. They're supposed to have the answers. Brilliant. Thank you. Both of those are factors, right? I didn't become a therapist not to fix things, right? And so we'll talk about this more with the fix-it mentality and how that can actually interfere with deep listening. And so it's really hard, man. I tell you, there was a job at the University of Utah there for a while where the whole job was trying to teach doctors bedside manner. And 90% of bedside manner is trying to get these doctors to just stop and listen. Mouth shut, ears open, right? Really, really hard to do when you feel like you're getting paid to fix a problem. And then time constraints. Therapists often have 45, 50 minutes, right? Sometimes if you're here, like working in prison, for example, my caseload got so high for a while, I had 15 minutes with my clients. And it was very much, for those of you that are familiar with solution-focused therapy, it was that on steroids. Like, let's get it in, let's get it done. But I noticed the problem was many of my guys needed to be heard more than they needed a solution unless there was a crisis. Okay? So, contrary to, I guess this doesn't contradict Judith Glaser, but in addition, sometimes silence is very important. okay? Not passive-aggressive, not punitive silence, but just letting people figure out their words. Some of us speak very quickly, some people speak more slowly. Silence is particularly helpful for those who speak more slowly. Okay, now, back to the personal. In loving and relating to the people we're closest to, intimate conversation meets a host of mutual needs for human connection. One of the things I'm so grateful for, I started writing on this topic as an undergraduate in college, and that is, it's a big fancy term, okay? It's a $20 term, ontological relationality, okay? Double dog dare you to use that in a sentence today, okay? Ontological relationality. Now what it means is ontology refers to what is fundamentally really real, okay? So anytime you make a claim about reality, you're making a claim of ontology. This is how things really are. You're making an ontology claim. Okay? Relationality argues that we are not just individual isolate beings inside our own skin. We actually dwell in relationship with other people, and who and what other people are around us is a part of who we are fundamentally. Okay? For example, we can do a quick experiment. So there are two classic personality characteristics that psychologists have been able to reliably measure for a century now. A lot of personality characteristics after years of data that kind of fall away, fall out of fashion, the data starts to fall apart. But there's two that are still reliable and valid today, extroversion and introversion. Okay? So an extrovert is somebody who derives energy from social relationships. Okay? There's somebody who seeks out contact, relating to other people tends to charge up their batteries rather than deplete it. That's an extrovert. Okay? Now, I've noticed on the TikTok or Instagramatons is it tends to present extroverts as boorish and outgoing. Not necessarily. You can be an outgoing introvert, believe it or not. It's where you derive your energy from. Okay? So an introvert then is somebody who may enjoy the company of other people or not, but they derive their energy, what charges their battery is solitude. Okay? So extroverts are charged up by relating to other people. Introverts are drained by other people, but charged up in solitude. So how many of you are extroverts? Okay, 1. Wow, how many of you are introverts? Now, how many of you have been sitting here thinking that depends? Oh, most of you, okay? So what we have is a third construct that we are not good at measuring, called ambivert. Okay, an ambivert is somebody, in some relationships they're recharged, and in some relationships they're drained. That it depends on the context of the relationship. For example, I'm an extrovert, but what I do for a living, and by the way, this sounds metal, is I help people fight demons for a living. Right? Some of you do too. Now, it's their personal demons, their traumas, their anxieties, their depressions, their stress, but I help them fight demons for a living. You know what drains my battery really fast? Is when a client comes in and they leave me alone with their demons. It's exhausting to fight their demons by myself. What really charges me up is when they're sitting with me, they've got their shield, I've got my sword, and we fight together. Oh, I love that. I walk out of those sessions just chipper. But when I'm left alone fighting somebody else's demons, I'm drained. I need a nap. So the reason why we can't measure ambiversion well is because it depends on context. Okay? So one of the things we find is that human beings, by and large, except for some extreme cases, like narcissistic personality disorder and schizoid personality disorder, most people are ontologically relational. That who they're with greatly informs their well-being. So this creates what's called social relationship theory, SRT, if you all want to read up on it, where they find that people's biology actually changes depending on who they're with. There's this phenomenon called emotional co-regulation. Some of you with children have done this without necessarily knowing there's all these big fancy terms with it. Imagine a kid with a boo-boo and all they need is to be held. You're not the one with a skin knee, so your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, right? You rest and digest. They're hurting, so their sympathetic nervous system is activated. You hold them, relating to their pain brings up your stress a little bit and greatly decreases their stress. You're biologically co-regulating with one another, okay? When you've got some tea to sip and you can't wait for lunch to sit with your friend over lunch and sip that tea, you're emotionally co-regulating. It's actually modifying both of you biologically in relation to one another. Once you know this, one of the things you can do is capitalize on these listening skills to be the one that helps other people regulate, and by doing so, it helps you regulate as well. Weird. So what we've been saying in philosophy for a long time, neuroscientists have just barely started publishing about. So how do we go about informing and participating in mutual connection? One is informing one another about current life events. This depends on context. Who is the other that we're informing? For example, a few years ago, now keep in mind, I've been married for almost 35 years, and I'm a psychologist, so I just want to highlight that it's understandable we don't always get it, because I didn't for decades. I would come home from work, I would sit down, my sweetheart would say, "How was your day?" And my response was, "Fine." Please pass the mashed potatoes. Okay? Now, some of you, I can tell from your expressions, like, "Oh, Draper, really?" "Yeah, Draper, really, I totally did that." It took her years to say, when you come home, and I know you live a very busy life, you do like so many things throughout your days, and you just say, "Oh, it was fine, I feel disconnected from you. Would you please give me a sketch and an outline of some of the things that happened in your day so I can feel connected to you?" Okay? So now I try to take a mental note, because a big chunk of what I do is confidential. So I can't say, "Well, I met with so-and-so and this is their issue." That's confidential, we don't talk about that. But what I can do is say, "I had 6 clients today. You know, a couple of them left me alone with their demons. That's why I'm really tired. But some, we have, fought a good fight. It was noble. Still tired, because even that's a workout, but very grateful for it." So just try to give her a sketch of what happened, even if I can't reveal any details, right? She feels so much more connected to me. Now, when my son comes upstairs and gives me the chin, and I go, "Yo," and he goes, "Sup?" And I go, "Shit." And he goes, "Cool," and walks away. That's the connection he needs, okay? So it really depends on the context, okay? So this can be a bit gendered. In the research that I saw, it's like a 70-30 split. Women are 70% more likely to want updates in story and context, whereas it's only true for about 30% of the time for men. But again, that research is hard to nail down, because in some situations the man wants the background and history, and in other cases they don't. But it's about a 70-30 split in general. It's gendered. So ask questions of one another about feelings and experiences. Learning to assume less and be informed more. Practice curiosity is one of the best things you can do in a relationship. So, as you guys know, my sweetheart is a chemistry teacher in a high school. This is a remarkably challenging job. She tends to work with the very bright and precocious students, and they tend to be pretty high-strung. Unfortunately, bright, precocious students often have bright, precocious parents who are also very high-strung. And so she's constantly having to deal with upset parents. "Why weren't their grades posted today?" "Well, they took the quiz at 2. It's 4. Can I please have time to grade the quizzes," right? And she's constantly having to deal with that. So she would come home, and I would just try to really relate. "Oh my gosh, that's so frustrating." We'll talk about empathic communication more here in a minute. But one of the things is I would just assume without really listening to what was going on with her. And so this year, I made a goal. I'm going to actually sit and listen better than I have before. And I found out that it's rarely anger or frustration, and it's more she's demoralized and hopeless. It's altogether deeper and more problematic than what I thought. Because frustration, anger is the energy of change, right? When we're angry, it's like we got to change something. And so that's one of the healthy uses of anger. Less healthy is taking anger out on us and other people. Healthy use of anger is working to change. So there I am thinking that she's going to change things because she's angry and frustrated, misreading that she's not angry or frustrated, she's hopeless, right? But it took me stepping back, exercising this curiosity, asking questions rather than assuming to really get that. So discussing topics of mutual interest, connecting. It's like many years ago, violating the family norms. I started dating when I was very young. I have to sneak out and do it because my parents were the ones where you group date until you go on a religious mission, and then only after that are you allowed to go on individual dates. I started going on individual dates at 12 because who cares about rules? And my grandfather found out about it. And I was 15 and I was helping Grandpa make wooden Christmas ornaments in his workshop. And Grandpa pulls me aside and says, "So I hear you've been sneaking out with girls." And I go, "Yep." And he goes, "Okay, if you're out of courting for a bride, you need to look for 4 things. Courting for a bride? Grandpa. Number 1, is she a good shot? Number 2, is she a good cook? Number 3, does she have a good head on her shoulders? And number 4, is she good looking? But he said, if she's got the first three, she's got the fourth, right? Now, some of you are saying, but I don't shoot, I don't believe in guns. That's not what Grandpa meant. In the face of intensity and adversity, can they focus and get a task done? Okay? Well, later I asked him about number 3, good head on her shoulders. And he says, oh boy, that parts that up to you. Do you have things in common with her? Can you go on a long drive and sit in conversational silence where you feel connected and close? And can you actually have deep conversations about things the two of you care about? He said, the last thing you want is to marry a pretty person, you're a year into the marriage and realize you have nothing in common. Okay? Well, I've done a lot of couples counseling. You know what I see a lot? People getting married, getting a year into the marriage and realizing they have nothing in common. So one of the things I would encourage couples to do is find their points of interest. Like the divorce rates here in Utah, particularly Utah County, are interesting because across the country we hear the 7-year itch. Some of you may be familiar with that, where breakup and divorce rates hit, they start to spike about year 7. Here, it's when the youngest child is in high school. That's when divorces are most likely. And what I hear from couples that I'm working with is we were so busy focusing on the one thing we had in common, our kids, that we never developed anything else in common with one another. And now that all our older kids are gone and it's just us and Junior, we just sit in silence all the time. And it feels suffocating. And so one of the things I would like to offer is people can create and build things in common, but it takes both of them to do it. So demonstrating undivided attention. This builds a lot of intimacy. Now, I'm a little bit worried because when I moved to Utah, the word intimacy becomes cover for all sorts of G, PG, PG-13, R, and X-rated activities. So when I say intimacy, I mean emotional closeness, okay? And so really listening deeply to one another can build a lot of emotional closeness between people or within groups of people. So demonstrating undivided attention. And I've got some pointers on how to do that coming up. So here's some pointers. Nonverbal listening skills. Number 1, time. Quality time arises through quantity time. Like back to Grandpa, boy, if you're out of courting for a bride, that Grandpa, one of the things that he impressed upon me in that conversation, he said, take your girl on a date every week. You plan it. Doesn't have to be expensive, but you plan it, you make it happen. Take her on a date every week. And I said, why, Grandpa? And he said, when am I not working? And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, so he's a farmer, he's a retired steel worker, and he runs a carpentry shop, and he was in his 70s at the time. He's always busy. And he said, so therefore it would be understandable Grandma feels neglected and left out of my life, right? I said, yeah. And he goes, so I take that pretty girl out on a date every week. Make sure it's just the two of us, right? Well, that's a big ask, especially when I had little kids. But thank goodness, the art of listening deeply, making friends with people in our apartment complexes. We'd start a babysitting circle where we'd watch their kids, they'd watch our kids. That'd free us up at night to go on a date. And sometimes our dates were literally just going on a long walk and then laying in the park and looking at the stars, because we were poor back then. But quality time arises from quantity time, and we have to set the time apart for other people in order for that quality time to develop, okay? It is a necessary condition, but not necessarily a sufficient one. But you got to have the quantity time to get the quality time. Now, the other issue is distraction. Oh my goodness gracious. I should be grateful for this device, because the devices and this device in the hands of my clients gives me all sorts of work to do as a therapist, guaranteed job security. Okay? But if you're on a date, this needs to go away. One of the things I realize is because of how busy I'm involved in so many different projects, I'd be on a date answering texts from my colleagues, scheduling another meeting with a client, etc., when I'm supposed to be on a date with my pretty girl. Put this away. So one of the things I've gotten in the habit of doing now, date starts silent in the pocket, right? So there's actually a term that youngins these days developed. It's called phubbing. It's snubbing somebody with your phone, like ignoring them with your phone. Imagine you're on a first date with somebody and they're on their phone the whole time. What's the chances of a second date, right? They're phubbing you. And what's interesting is if you confront them, they're probably not even aware that they're doing it. We're just very device-oriented and we're less people-oriented. I'm not going to say the devices are all bad. No, we need them. Let's use them responsibly. At the same time, though, let's also engage with other people flesh and blood in real time. If you're talking to your kid, device goes away. If you're out with your sweetheart, device goes away. Here's a challenge for those of us who supervise other people. In a supervision meeting, devices, you need to be faced away from them unless you're actively calendaring or something like that, right? I've got one supervisee, I only meet with her remotely. All my other apps are turned off. And so yes, I'm using a device, my computer, to meet with her, but everything else goes away. Likewise, if I'm meeting with a client remotely, phone is on silent, all the other notifications are turned off, they have my undivided attention. See, technology isn't inherently the problem. You can use it to connect with other people, but you need to make sure that your undivided attention is on them. So get away from facing your electronics. Man, one of the things that I really loved, excuse me, one of my mentors, Will, I would come into his office, and he had it wasn't a big office, but he had this little not really coffee table, but this little sitting table. It was tiny, only fit 2 chairs, and then he had his desk over here. If I walked into his office, he would scoot his chair up under his computer, and he would come over to that little table and sit with me. That was brilliant. I'm just watching this going, you genius. Because then I felt like I had his undivided attention. And he goes, I would encourage you to do the same thing. Carl Rogers, you guys remember back to your psychology class? He was a psychologist that said there should be no physical barrier between you and your clients. So you don't have your desk in the way, you don't have a table in the way. You make sure that there is no physical barrier between the two of you. And that was psychologically important. So therefore, when I'm meeting with my supervisees, I get up, come around from my big desk, sit on my lazy boy, and we talk. When I'm meeting with clients, my kids know that if daddy's in his chair surrounded by his big gaming monitors and huge towers of speakers and everything, they're not going to get a moment of my attention. But if they come to me and touch me and say, Dad, can I talk to you upstairs? Can we go on a walk? Can we get in the hot tub? Then they're going to have my undivided attention, and I help teach them that code. Okay, if you need my attention, please come ask for it, and I'll be glad to step away from all the distractions. So, smiling. It doesn't have to be a huge grin. One of the things that interests me is the research on smiling is that smiling with your eyes matters even more than smiling with your mouth. There's a phenomenon that happens, and it's interesting because this actually started amongst the early YouTube stars where they were trying to smile because they were taught to smile for the camera, so they smiled just with their mouths. To us old folks, that comes across as psychopathic, right? Because they're not smiling with their eyes. But one of the things we find is when people have a kindly glance, it's usually that their smile wrinkles here are wrinkled. Even if they're not grinning at you, they're smiling with their eyes. And so one of the things that can be very helpful, and this is something that a dear supervisor of mine years ago, Beverly, taught me. She said, when you encounter another, focus on the fact of your gratitude for their existence, right? I see Adam, really glad Adam's here. And so that's that smile in my soul, so to speak, and that's going to be reflected in my eyes, even if I'm not grinning at Adam, right? And so that is something to practice, and it can take practice. Okay, now, speaking of a listening skills class, this is the listening skill that I was taught. It's called the Solaire model, and this is the posture our professors used to make us sit in during our listening skills classes, okay? So one is you're square. Your shoulders are parallel with the person you're talking to, okay? Open. This is a closed posture. This is an open posture. Now, depending on dress and gender, you may need to vary this up a little bit, okay? Another one, L, stands for leaning, where you lean forward in a way that seems attentive. The other is eye contact. You make intermittent eye contact with the person as you're speaking to them. It's very common that when people speak, they break eye contact, and when they listen, they make eye contact, okay? Great, run with it. That's not essentially a problem. And then responsive, where you're demonstrating non-verbally that you're listening as well as verbally. Oh, my goodness gracious. So when I got to my very first practicum, working with clients for the first time, I squared right up and did this, and the clients felt like they were being interrogated by an ecclesiastical leader. Okay, so there are ways to vary it up. For example, you can still be open and lean forward with your face. You can even cross your legs insofar as your chest remains open. But if you're like this, that's closed posture. You guys feel that? This is more open posture, even if your legs are crossed. You can lean forward with your face, even if you're not leaning forward with your body, although it does allow for more power non-verbally when they're getting to the good part of the tea they sip in and you go, You know what I mean? Like that shows even more engagement. The facial expression, right, leaning in. One of the things that we've also found, speaking of gender, is that when you are parallel with somebody and they are a man, that's less comfortable for them, so you often want to sit obliquely. Like Adam and I will demonstrate this here in a few minutes, where because Adam's a man, I'm not going to sit square knee to knee with him. Instead, he and I will sit slightly obliquely. By the way, that's also more comfortable for many women as well, but we find it disproportionately comfortable for men. Okay? And so it turns out the Solaire model is a good place to start, but once you start there, you can start varying it up. How do I capture the principle of being approximately square? How do I capture the principle of being approximately open? How do I use various parts of my body to lean into what they're saying? How do I gauge eye contact? And how do I remain responsive? That can feel overwhelming, but usually by the end of like a 3-hour lab, people are already varying it up and making it their own, right? So take this as a place to start. For those of you that took martial arts as a kid or may still be involved, it's like when you're doing, wax on, paint the fence, etc. You're not really learning to fight, but that's the foundational set of skills. So is the Solaire model, right? Once you got it, now you can vary it up in context, but it's a good place to start. So the Solaire model actually comes from the research of a fellow by the name of Kharkov. And so if you're curious, we can talk more about that later. Okay, try nots. Try not to interrupt. Pausing is natural in conversation. People need a few seconds to gather their thoughts and to breathe. This drives my dad nuts. I speak very quickly. I'm very, very responsive. It's almost like I do it for a living. My father speaks very deliberately and very slowly. And so anytime he pauses, I fit a paragraph into every pause. And after a while, he gets frustrated. We said, would you just let me finish my thought? And I'm like, yeah, except I've had 100 thoughts in the time you're trying to express one, right? He's understandably, he feels criticized by that. And so one of the things that I've learned to do is the quality of what I will get from my father's idea is greater if I'll just let him finish speaking, okay? He pauses a lot. And then I started reflecting. So does my sweetheart. She's very careful and deliberate in her choice of words. And so therefore, when I started pausing and listening more deeply, the quality of our conversations increased. So one of the greatest skills, this comes from actually a fellow by the name of David Alexander, another supervisor of mine. He said, okay, Draper, you're very quick. I can see you get exactly where your clients are coming from, and that's as much a curse as it is a blessing. Because you know where the clients are coming from, but they don't feel connected to you because you're 6 steps ahead in the conversation. You need to stay in the same step of the conversation they are. I went, okay. He said, breathe. I need you to take a deep breath and count to 3 before you respond. This is one of the hardest things I had to do in clinical training. Suicide interventions, drug overdose, all that was easy compared to just stopping and breathing for 3 seconds before I responded. So for those of you that are more thoughtful and slower to respond, you don't need to do this exercise. But for those of us that are really quick, stop, breathe, count to 3 before you respond. Please do not avoid eye contact. Avoiding eye contact communicates disinterest, distrust, or discomfort. And so that's one where please vary that up, especially if you're working with people on the spectrum. Because I've noticed when neurotypical people are working with others on the spectrum, it's hard for some people in the autism spectrum to keep and maintain eye contact. And so the neurotypical people feel like they're being ignored, et cetera. So please, as the neurotypical person, be aware that when you're working with somebody on the spectrum, eye contact is very difficult, and it's very difficult for a key reason. Now, there's a bunch of them, but there's one key reason in particular. There are tons of muscles on your face, and your face is doing a whole bunch of things all at once. It's very stimulating. And therefore, if I'm keeping eye contact with you, and you're nodding and playing along, there are all these subtle shifts to your face. And that can be overwhelming to attend to. Now, for us neurotypical people, it's not a problem. We're used to it. But for some people on the spectrum, it's very distracting. So they'll look away while they're talking to you. And again, if you're working with somebody who's autistic or on the spectrum, please be patient with that. That doesn't mean they're ignoring you. And so you can do various things to say, oh, do you know what I mean by that? And then you say, yeah. Like, what does that mean to you? And if they respond and it shows that they're tracking your conversation, it's clear they're not ignoring you.
Dr. Draper?
Yeah.
Could I add with that, don't multitask, especially when interacting with somebody who has autism. It can be very distracting to them that way as well, and they don't feel heard.
Yeah, so I don't know if our friends online could hear.
don't multitask when you're working with people on the spectrum. In fact, please don't multitask generally when you're listening to people, but especially for not with those on the spectrum. As you all know, my oldest son was autistic, and I couldn't listen with half an ear. If I did, he felt I wasn't listening to him at all. Like one of my favorite memories, I had downloaded a game called Portal 2. It's a puzzle-solving game that requires pretty intense three-dimensional reasoning and problem solving, 2 skills I utterly lack. Well, he was a savant with that. And so I would get onto this very complex board with this very complex puzzle in the game, and he would peer over my shoulder and go, okay, click here, click, in, out, in, out, in, out. You set these portals that are in portals or out portals, and he could just glance at a board and do it in a second. But I found that for him to feel like I listened, I would have to turn away from my computer, even though he's looking, and made it really hard because I'm trying to track because I want to solve this puzzle. But it got back to then he felt heard. And then I could turn back to the computer, have him sit with me and say, okay, show me again. But I had to turn away from the computer first and give him my undivided attention. Because if I didn't, he'd just walk away, not pouting or upset, just think, oh, Dad's not listening, right? So thank you, Adam. That's a crucial point. So one of the things that is like for those of you that are ABA certified or ABA therapists, teaching eye contact is quite challenging because you want your eye contact to be intermittent rather than just like a dead cold stare, right? That can be intimidating as well. And so that's one where the 60-40 rule applies. As you're talking, kind of let your gaze wander. As they're talking, look right at them, okay? And if you're following this approximate guideline, you'll be making sufficient eye contact. Another one, this is a big challenge for me, so I added it because it might be a challenge for some of you. It's called jumping the speaker's point. There is a style of communication called circumstantial. Okay, circumstantial communication works like this, where I go up to somebody and say, hey, what happened with the select health approvals? And they go, well, you know, my grandmother, and they start telling me all of the context going around what happened with the select health approval. This is called circumstantial speech. And after a while, you get a feel of where it's going. You say, oh, okay, so it wasn't approved of, and the reason it took you 2 days extra is because of the health problems of your grandmother, and that you're now seeing the same issues in her medical care being approved that you're seeing. It's like, okay, I got it. And they're like, I only got half of my sentence out, right? But you're like, come on, circumstantial speech is very tough for those who want to get directly to the point. And so one of the things that you can do that I found very helpful when I'm working with friends, family, clients, colleagues who engage in the circumstantial speech is callbacks. Okay, callback is a technique in comedy. You know, some comics will tell a joke earlier in their routine, and then later they'll tell a story, and they'll refer back to the earlier joke. That's called a callback. And in good communication, we do the same thing. So when my friends, family, colleagues, clients are engaging in circumstantial speech, I listen deeply and I say, okay, so I hear this thing with your grandmother's health problem. Please help me understand what that has to do with the select health approvals. You guys get that? It's a simple technique. And so that can help facilitate getting to an understanding. Because thinking of my cousin, sorry cousin, where I could sit for an hour and still not understand what the point is. Okay? And there are times we really do need to make decisions. And so using the callback technique can be very helpful. So losing focus. Exercise intentionality when your mind wanders to come back to the conversation at hand. So our minds often wander, especially if we're meeting with a lot of people throughout the course of a day. And so actually bringing back our attention can be very helpful. So there is techniques you can use to use this. One is, can I repeat back exactly what this person just said to me? And if I can't, or if I'm not 100% sure, then I need to attend more deeply, okay? Like, am I looking at their face? Am I making eye contact? Am I really attending? Am I listening deeply? Okay. And so there are these various things. Can I really repeat back what this person is saying to me? And then tuning back in. And it's not uncommon where I have to say, I'm sorry, I kind of got lost there for a minute. I'm kind of lost in the woods. This is the part I remember. Can you catch me up, right? Now, some people would say, well, as a supervisor, as a therapist, et cetera, that must just be awful. No, actually, misreflecting and showing your humility and asking to reconnect can actually facilitate greater therapeutic rapport or supervisory rapport. So try not to focus on irrelevant details of the point. Try to stay focused on the major point of what the speaker is saying. It's like a colleague of mine had just gone to the Testament concert. I love thrash metal music, and it was at a Testament concert years ago I learned I'm too old to mosh. And so he's trying to make a point about something that happened after the Testament concert, and I found myself curious, who opened for them? Is that relevant in the moment? No. And so trying to focus, okay, what is he saying? What point is he making? Making sure we're there. And after he's made his point, then I can say, oh, by the way, who opened for them? Because Testament is really good at picking a local metal band and having a local band open for them, right? So it's a great way to learn new music. Change the subject prematurely. This happens frequently in interpersonal communication. I come home and I say, and Sweetie says, how was your day? Oh my gosh, it was such a bad day, this and this and this happened. And then she goes, oh my gosh, and then she starts telling about her day. But you notice that was a topic change. So therefore, I feel unheard because now we've changed the topic to hers. So one of the things that's a vital skill is sticking to A. What is the topic at hand? If you're sitting down with a client and you want to know what happened with another individual that they're around, and you want to get to the point quickly, then sometimes you can lose it. So instead, try to stick to A. Rather than, well, yeah, you did this, but this is the outcome. Okay, you've just changed the subject. And there's a time to do that, but it's once the topic has been thoroughly addressed and you thoroughly understand where they're coming from. So try to stick to A. And that's one, like when I work with couples, I'll have them actually turn towards each other and they said, oh, so awkward and so cringe. And it is. Now, one of you bring up a topic, and both of you are going to talk about that topic until the person who brought the topic up says, okay, I've addressed this topic, and then you can switch to the other topic. And again, it's like the Solaire model. It's this really awkward thing you do at first until you get comfortable and start varying it up. Now, making sarcastic comments or joking too soon. Sarcasm is interesting because it's both some people's love language as well as a cause of many of their fights. Okay? So if you're trying to joke along with somebody, timing is very important. Really get a feel for what's going on and making sure the other person is on the same page with you before you try to add some levity or humor. One of the things that my professors were so strict about 100 years ago when I was a student is to never joke with your clients. They also said we were never allowed to ask why questions because I was blaming the victim. I have discarded both of those lessons. You can. Life is as tragic as it is funny. If you can't cry and laugh with your clients, then you're only focusing on one part of life rather than the whole spectrum of life's experiences. And people often appreciate being asked why questions. It's how you ask the question that matters. Not, why did you do this? But instead, help me understand why this unfolded, right? It's a very different way of asking a why question. So please, humor is great, use it, but make sure you're on the same page with the person before you do. Listening to respond. We've covered this bunch, we're going to cover it even more. It's much more challenging to listen to understand. And so we're thinking of our response before they finish their point. That's listening to respond. Please endeavor to listen to understand. Do I really get where this person is coming from? Okay. So to do, as I said, listen to understand. Once you understand, endeavor to discern rather than judge. Okay? Discernment involves opening up possibilities rather than foreclosing them. I was at a victims advocacy meeting a couple of years ago. At my age, everything feels like yesterday. It was a couple years ago, and one of the people in the room started launching into the way in which the victim had endangered herself in several key ways. And the victim's right there. Okay? And so that was really tough to kind of back off, encourage the victim to keep speaking, and to see things from her point of view rather than just jumping in, judgment, here's what happened, here's what the outcome is, therefore. No, let's back off. Discernment often opens up possibilities where it doesn't feel like there is any. So discernment is, here's some things that could have happened, here's some other things that could have happened, please help me understand. That's discernment. So judgment forecloses possibility, discernment opens it up. Allow completion of concept. So help the speaker make their point before changing the subject. As I said, stick to A. Okay, so please help me understand. Ask questions, be curious. Demonstrate intentional attention. There's a tongue twister for you. Demonstrate intentional attention. So we talked about the Solaire model, how you put yourself physically. One of the things that is interesting is feet. Speaking of nonverbal communication. So let's say you and I bump into each other in the hallway. You're going this way, I'm going this way. And we're talking, and if my feet are pointed away from you, even if I'm like looking at you, that implies that I'm going somewhere else other than this conversation. It's weird. There's a bunch of studies on this in business psychology that when you're talking to somebody, point your feet at them. Just that little subtle thing can make a bit of a difference. So intentional attention, facial expression, right? Be there. Be looking, rather than looking over their shoulder, looking for the escape route, be looking at them and responding to them. And then again, facial expressiveness. One of the things that I do appreciate some of us struggle with, me in particular, is we need to teach our facial expressions sometimes to use their inside voices. Sometimes our facial expressions are very loud. That is as much a blessing as a curse. And so we can temper it a little bit, but it can be a very good thing. Like when you're engaged, when they're telling that thing their girlfriend did yesterday, and you're like, whoa, really? And you don't even have to say, whoa, really, because your face is saying it for you, that's great, right? But if you're keeping a placid, blank expression, then people feel disconnected. So respond to intention, paraphrase back. One of the phrases that has saved more relationships, professionally and personally, is the, so if I understand you correctly, or if I understand you correctly, and then rephrasing back what you heard the person say. That can do a lot of good in interpersonal communication. Okay, trying not to do. This is a challenge. Try not to fix it.
Guys do that. That's what we do.
Well, here's the thing. A, you're not wrong, but guys aren't the only ones that do it. And so one of the things we find, especially in the therapy fields, is those of us who are male identifying with XY chromosomes, we're in the significant minority in the talk therapy fields. And so when I'm teaching supervisees, 9 out of 10 of them are women. And that whole thing, well, I'm here to help you feel better, and so they start trying to fix their clients' problems. Now, here's the thing, and this is kind of hard to hear. That's not done out of compassion. It seems like it is, but when people engage in a fix-it mentality, it's usually a way for them to deal with their own anxiety. You're upset, that upsets me out of empathy, so I'm going to provide a solution to decrease my own upset by you solving this problem in this way. Now, what complicates this, a colleague of mine is an evolutionary anthropologist, how our biological evolution informs how our cultures unfold. And one of the things that he talks about are the demands of the Y chromosome. Okay? There are 3 demands of the Y chromosome: to provide, to protect, and to procreate. And so there are plethoras, dozens and dozens of demands from the X chromosome. It's so much bigger than the Y chromosome. But the Y chromosome, it really boils down to those 3 things. We see that across time, place, and culture according to his research. To provide, well, you're coming to me with a problem, so I'm going to provide a solution for you. Hence, it seems like disproportionately men do this. Right? Oh, there is something that is threatening your welfare? Well, I'm going to help protect you by giving you a solution. Okay? And then procreate. I'm going to help create something that you can use to solve your problem. Provide, protect, and create, right? And so this is one where please be patient with those of you know and love with that Y chromosome, because it's yelling, provide, protect, rah, right? One of the things that's helpful is teaching people with that fix-it mentality, regardless of their chromosomes, is you can fix it by not fixing it. And we'll talk about latent, manifest, and latent meaning, because there is the manifest content of what they're saying. That's the surface level. My sweetie comes home, she's upset with some of the kids at school. The manifest content is her upset. These kids aren't doing their homework, their parents are jerks, things like that. Now, what's tricky is she's not actually giving me those problems to solve. She's looking to connect. That's the problem at hand. And so therefore, I get to attend to the latent content. The latent content is the emotion behind what somebody is saying. So what is the unmet need? Because they're coming to you and they're upset, there's likely an unmet or frustrated need. And so if you can listen to that, then you'll more deeply connect over time. And please, don't get it right. Please don't feel pressure to get it right at first. Like I didn't for years. When I realized that my wife's hopelessness was growing, I kept seeing it as anger and frustration when it was really hopelessness. And it took me a while to tune into the latent content of what she was saying. By the way, for those of you that remember your psychology classes, this comes from dream interpretation. There's the manifest content of the dream. I went on a road trip and I kept, kept delays, and I woke up sweating and frustrated. That's the manifest content. I had a dream about a frustrating road trip. The latent content is the frustration in their lives and why that's manifesting in a dream, right? So what goals, et cetera, are being blocked or are they prevented from accessing or succeeding in? So listen to the latent content, because that's how you fix it without fixing it. So if you listen to the emotion behind what they're saying, if I understand you correctly, you're really frustrated with going on with school. Yeah, I'm really frustrated, but that's not just it. Okay, what else is going on? Please help me understand, right? Again, I'm a psychologist. You think this would be easy. It took years, okay? So what is the emotion behind what they are saying? And that's what you respond to. So fix-it focuses just on manifest content where people often feel unheard. well, I came to you because this thing at work wasn't working and you gave me a solution, but you don't understand the full context or the emotional weight of this, so you just gave me a solution I can't even use. And even if I could use it, I still feel like you've ignored me and my stress. So, like with my wife, I had that fix-it mentality. And there's like gamification, if you guys are familiar with how to take a task and gamify it, and it increases task completion. And so for a couple of years, like I developed this whole curriculum, even presented to school districts on gamification, thanks to misunderstanding my wife. Right? Fixing it, rather than just stopping and listening and hearing. So true listening focuses on the emotion behind it. Frustration, care, worry, anger, love, care. There's a lot of things that have been going on, and it can take us a while to get to. What's beautiful is the effort of getting to the latent content helps the person that's talking to us feel more connected to us. Okay, to do. Ask open-ended questions. Bears repeating. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Ask to understand their key points. If I understand you correctly, this is the particular issue here. Okay? Summarize when appropriate. So it sounds like really what the key issue here is this, right? That's one way to summarize. If I understand you correctly, the main issue is this. That's another way to summarize. Fear silence. Please don't fear silence. That there will be pauses in conversations, and that's great. It's perfectly normal. Sometimes it can actually help people who speak more slowly develop their words and get them out. As I said, breathe. Do connect to your own experience or your agenda. Make sure you have connected with the speaker before sharing your experience. Make sure you're connected there. They can't turn their head, right, until you've seen things their way. Like, it's hard for people when you're trying to say, well, look at it this way, if we haven't seen it their way first, right? It gets back to that ancient Hebrew philosophy. When you help people turn towards, you've got to look at where they're looking first, and then once they get it, then you can help move their heads, right? But you got to join them there first, so they need to feel it. So this is a boss battle, meaning that we're going to take all the skills that we have collectively listened to, and we're going to try, or I'm going to try to do these three things with Adam, okay? I'm going to try to respond to the content of what he is saying, so it's clear to him that he knows that we're on the same page, we're talking about the same thing. Number two, I'm going to try to connect to the emotion of what he's talking about and try to respond to that verbally, and then also meaning. Meaning is when you connect X to Y. So X being content and Y being emotion. Oh, you feel this because of this. Okay? What's great is you can do this while asking questions. Okay? In fact, sometimes your reflection can be a question and sometimes a closed question. What's important is the reflection first. Okay? So as I'm going through and I'm trying to exercise these conversational skills, look at our list here. Am I responding to content, emotion, or both? Okay? And then if some of you would like to practice Adam, presuming you're okay with that, then we can have you come up on stage and practice with him as well. Okay? If any of you are interested. And then I'll be sitting there going, okay, that sounds like and if you ask, I'll say, that sounded like a reflection to content or emotion or meaning. Okay? Now, does that sound familiar from grad school to the two of you, this conversational style? Okay, good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my chair a little bit obliquely to Adam. Okay, so he and I, let's see, am I too close?
We'll make do.
We'll make do. So normally, yes. Thank you. Okay, so Adam, yesterday I'd sent you an email and I asked you to think about like some of the good things, bad things, highlights and lowlights of your day. Which would you like to start with, a highlight or a lowlight?
Let's go highlight.
Okay, so a highlight.
Honestly, what's been on my mind recently is that my first grandson was born. My first grandbaby was born about a week, just over a week ago.
Your first grandchild.
Yep.
Wow.
So it's been so much fun, and I absolutely love my kids. I'm so proud of my kids, but it's very interesting that with this grandbaby, the difference in the feelings that is there.
The feelings are different.
Yeah.
In what ways are they different? That's interesting.
It's so exciting to see my grandson, and it is so exciting to see my son as a father.
So it's doubly exciting. Not only is relating to a grandbaby, your first one, but also seeing your son as a father.
Yeah.
So give me a sense of what are some of the things that are exciting about it, because it seems very engaging.
What I love is to see people grow, become who they are. And so there's a part of this that I see that is exciting, because I see the journey of my son as he's now a father, and I'm excited to see how he'll be. I'm very, very proud of my son. And then as I see my grandson, I see an unknown, and I'm excited to see how it develops. It's kind of like a Polaroid picture. You know, when you take the picture and then you wait to see how it comes out. It's one of the things that drives me even to be a therapist, is I love to see the development of a person. And so this is very personal right there with my son and my grandson.
I love the combination of the potential growth in your grandson and the actual growth in your son. And you feel so excited because you get to have both the potential and the actual all at once.
Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, now, how much time do you have a sense that you'll be able to spend with your grandbabies? Like, do you guys have activities in common? If so, what are they?
Luckily, my son lives with us.
Oh.
So I have an opportunity to really spend time and see the process. So depending on how long they live with us, but I'm hoping we have at least a year in this beginning, and then see where their journey takes them. But so I'm very grateful, very lucky.
I can imagine every day the gratitude of being so close to the people you love so much.
It is.
Okay, so let's pause here. Thank you very much, Adam. So did I use any of these skills? Okay, which one, did I miss any of them, or did I get them all? I'm not sure. I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy focused on Adam. Okay, what was that?
I think you got them all.
Okay, so did I respond to the content of he has a new grandchild? Okay, did I respond to any of the emotion, pride, gratitude, anything like that? And did I connect the pride and gratitude with son and grandson? Okay, now, here's I'm going to make myself vulnerable here. Did you feel listened to?
Yes.
Okay, what are some of the things that I was doing that helped you feel listened to?
The body language, you're looking at me, you're repeating back some things, asking additional questions for clarification on things.
Excellent. Okay, so can we go to some lowlights next?
Yes.
Okay, so what are some of the lowlights that have happened recently?
Well, recently, and I'll use an example that happened here at work. There was an email that was sent out that had some things in it that were upsetting.
Oh, okay.
And you mentioned earlier today about the ambiguity of some things and the vagueness that comes into play, and when we fill in the blanks. So in this situation, it was something that my mind immediately went to all these other things. And with emails, one of the hardest part is an email can be sent, but people are busy and they have all kinds of things going on. And so a response may be there, but then it may take time to get another response.
Goodness. So I'm just imagining you get this email. It was phrased in a way that created a lot of stressful ambiguity. You started filling in the blanks with some of the things you're concerned about, and
Yep.
then you were left stewing in that.
Yep.
Because it would be a while before you got a response.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, how did you cope?
Well, luckily, and I want to give credit to the team that's involved in this. One of the first things I realized is that I was starting to spin on certain things. And so I reached out to my direct supervisor and I said, hey, can you talk? I need to work through something. And I was very grateful for that situation. And she sat and she talked to me. And I really appreciated the fact that she says, okay, do you need help with anything here? And I'm like, no, right now I just need to get my ideas through. I will talk through this and I will talk to the person involved in what's here. But what I needed at that moment more than anything was just somebody to work through that. And so I was very grateful for that.
Yeah, actually having somebody sit and listen carefully to you.
Yep.
I can imagine that would inspire gratitude. And I also really appreciate the way that she asked you what you needed.
Yes.
And how that really connected with you. And then you were empowered, I would imagine, to have a voice to say, no, I've worked through this, thank you for the support, that's what I needed. Right?
Yep.
Wow, okay.
And then from there, I knew that there would be another meeting that was there. And I was able to address it in the meeting, and the people involved with that meeting, I was very grateful for as it went through, and clarification was made. And the problem was nowhere near what was in my head that went through all those little spirals. But even being a therapist, I'm still human, and I have those worries. But I greatly appreciated that. And so there was about a day and a half or so where those anxieties would kind of creep in as I was working through some of those things. But I was really appreciative of that team and the way that they worked together.
Well, I just imagine the feeling of connection with your team and the way that provided some security in the face of that anxiety, and the way you got a lot of support for them. No wonder you feel so grateful.
It really meant a lot. And looking on that situation, it also, it made the people within that team more approachable all the way around.
It made them more approachable.
Yeah, in my own head. Because what I see a lot, and I've been up at USDC for a very long time, is that moments like that people start spinning can happen often. But most of the conflicts that happen is when it doesn't get addressed, or it goes through the telephone game along the way. And what I really appreciate about that team is direct conversations, so that there isn't the ambiguity. And it was very interesting when that whole situation was said and done. The reality is that I felt closer to the people within that team than I had before the conflict.
Yeah. The very people involved in stressing you out unintentionally were also the very people that you then felt more connected to.
Yep.
Yeah, that they filled in the ambiguity with their attentiveness.
Yes.
And so now you feel even closer to them.
Yes.
Wow. Excellent. Okay. How'd I do? Pretty good? Okay. Adam, so as we're talking, what was I doing? Like, first of all, did you feel connected?
I did.
Okay. And so what was I doing that helped you feel connected?
This similar type things. The body language is there. You're not multitasking. That's a big thing that I've learned over the years. But you're not checking other things. You're not looking at other things. You were focused. Again, you asked more questions. You restated. And even if you would have restated emotions that were completely wrong, it would have, no, that's not it. It's this. Mm-hmm. But it's so it just keeps the person engaged. It kept me engaged.
And I love that you brought up that if I had misreflected, misidentified the feeling, that would have given you reason to clarify. Therefore, that increases your insight and then gives me a chance to connect to that feeling that you've made more clear.
Yep.
So it's win-win.
And a lot of times people are afraid that if they reflect wrong or reflect something back wrong, that someone will be upset. But I haven't ever had that experience with people.
Yeah. In fact, I'm actually connecting with you there as well, because I've had some people get very upset. No, I've told you before, like clients. And then that outburst of emotion has, like especially anger, can prove cathartic. And so if I'm willing to stay connected, wow, just that really frustrates you. I totally got it wrong. I'm sorry. Does that happen to you often? What's that like for you, right?
Yep.
Even then, it turns out to be therapeutic.
Yeah, it opens up more connection.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, do any of you want to come up and practice? Would any of you like a turn to practice some of these skills? Because if not, Adam, would you like to practice on me?
I can sure give it a try.
Okay. So would you like to come up and practice?
Not on the live stream.
We have to kill the camera first. Okay, because I've been a fan of yours for a while. And so would you feel safe doing this or reasonably safe given that you're exposed? Okay, so can I trade you places? And Adam, are you willing to do this with our friend?
Sure.
Okay, come on up.
Hello, Hillary.
Hi, Adam.
How you doing?
Doing okay.
Good. So we'll kind of pick up where, like Dr. Draper did with me.
You too.
Yep. And so he had asked me to think of something that was good that was recently happening. That was where I did with my grandson. And then something that may have been struggling with. So where would you like to start?
Let's go bad to good so we can end on a good note.
Okay, bad to good it is. What's been going on?
I'm really struggling with imposter syndrome as I'm wrapping up my grad school.
Okay, finishing up school, feeling like, can I really do this?
Yep.
Okay.
It's been hard, especially working with people with more experience and questioning if I can do as good a job or if it's better to just step back and let you step in. You're the expert on DBT. You're going to be more successful with one of our individuals, and I'm still learning, fumbling along the way.
It can be really hard when you start out and you're learning all these different things. You have all this information coming in, and you're trying to find out what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it really can feel like we're stumbling and that we fall sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like there might be a little bit of a fear of failing.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's hard because a lot of this work is you're learning and growing as you're doing. And so this isn't something I can just study and then go into a session, oh yeah, I know what to do. So I'm growing every time. My clients are growing with me whether they want to or not. And so
Right.
sometimes I ping pong between confidence and I'm not good enough. So that's the low light that I'm dealing with right now.
That is a hard situation. What do you think actually helps build your confidence in this?
Being able to talk to colleagues and supervisors and kind of process my own anxieties that I'm dealing with.
Okay.
And also just generally connecting with the individuals
Okay.
and knowing that I don't need to be perfect to help them and to connect with them. So I ping pong.
Have you ever connected with somebody by being perfect?
No.
Have you ever connected with somebody when you were vulnerable?
Yes.
You're learning through the process that failure is one of those keys. Being real with them. I've had the privilege to work with you as you go through this, and I've seen your own progress and growth. And where do you see where you've grown?
It's hard on the spot. I think just overall, kind of like you said, like I don't need to be perfect and recognizing that, and also recognizing I am learning and growing every day. You know, I look back 2 years ago, 4 years ago, before I was even in grad school, like I am a very different person in my work.
Yes.
And so it is happening. I just want it to be now.
Now, fast forward.
Yeah.
I definitely can understand that part.
Okay,
So-
can I interrupt?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things that was interesting is first of all, did you guys see responding? Like, was he connected with the content, emotion, and meaning?
Yes.
Yes. But one of the things that I'd like to highlight is you went to the latent content. You never used the word fear. You did, and it connected. Did you feel that?
Yeah.
When Adam, you went there, you went to the latent content. And then you started offering more advanced skills even of reflective questioning, right? Well, where do you see the difference? So it was interesting that you went through these basics and then started getting into some of the advanced skills pretty quick. But the other thing is that latent content. Like when you connected with the fear, that's when I saw your energy change a little bit. Like that's what you were really talking, at least from my outside point of view, but I'd like your opinion on that, Hillary.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I've talked to Adam about these vulnerabilities before. And yeah, that he is able to connect and understand and empathize and make me feel heard, and I do feel connected with Adam sitting right here.
Brilliant. And so now that you have a chance to reflect, what are some of the things that Adam is doing that, like, both today on the stage as well as when you guys are out working, that you feel connected to him? Like, what are some of the things that he does?
His body language, he has very good eye contact. His cadence and tone are very calming and soft. You do really good, especially if I pop in your office. You're not, okay, yeah, which I'm bad at. But you really will. You'll just drop everything and turn and, how can I help you? What's up? And so, like, your genuine intent to communicate and listen, even though you're not verbally saying that, it is felt.
So the nonverbals are very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How are we doing on time, Adam? Can you see the clock?
We got about 5 more minutes, 6 minutes.
Excellent. So you guys want to continue this, or should we ask the audience for questions? And are you okay with that, Hillary?
Yeah, whatever.
She wanted to end on a positive note, so I think if we're listening to her, we should allow her to.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, tell me about the good stuff.
Graduation's April 28th.
Yes.
So, again, the ping pong, I am very excited, and as I've been reflecting, like, I do see growth, and trying to wrap up my capstone project, like, I'm doing the things, it's exciting.
Yes. When does the capstone? When do you have to have the capstone done?
I'm not actually sure. Presentation's the 20th, poster is due this weekend, because I gotta print it.
Okay.
Then I've got to finish writing the paper based on the poster I did, so it feels a little backward. I started the paper last year, so it's been like a ongoing project, but
Okay.
it's coming together. It's fine.
It is.
It feels good to be done.
It's
I'm
gonna feel so good.
Just looking forward to these next chapters in my life, finishing school, advancing my career. I'd like to finally start family planning. My husband and I have been together for 15 years.
Okay.
So it just feels like a lot of doors are opening right now. It's springtime, so my seasonal depression is lightening.
Oh yes.
Anyway, so I'm just like, good things are coming. I've worked hard, and I deserve to be where I am.
That is so exciting. That is so fun to hear you talk about that. Going back and remembering some of those times in my own life, but I'm so excited for you. What are you going to do to celebrate when it is done? Graduation's there. What's the celebration?
We've been planning a vacation, but due to things in the world, it's like trying to decide somewhere safe.
Okay.
But the other
valid.
day I just had thought, let's just do it anyway, because I can't live my life around worrying about what might or might not happen in another country. So we're
True.
going to plan a trip.
That is awesome. So exciting. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. Thank you, guys. That was very great. Appreciate you doing that. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Okay, and thank you all very much for coming today. It was lovely hanging out with you again. Adam, do you remember what our next topic is for next quarter?
I don't right off the top of the bat. I'll have to go back through the emails.
Excellent, because we got a bunch more topics planned.
Yes,
So
we
again,
do.
Hillary, double thank you to you and Adam, especially allowing me to put you all on the spot, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye-bye now.